Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this week's Queen's speech at the state opening of Parliament, the government's intention to move us further down the path to authoritarianism was laid out. Nothing surprising. Boris Johnson explained it all in his Beginner's Guide to Fascism, I mean the Conservative Party manifesto. But will his attempts to bring in photo ID requirements for voting actually work? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there are a number of ways that Boris Johnson has made clear he intends to legislate to keep the Conservatives in power with only a minority of support in the country. One of them is the requirement for photo ID in order to vote. The purpose of this is to suppress Labour's core support base. Sure, not enough deprived people vote in this country, which is why they continue to be deprived. Their vote is not up for grabs, and it keeps the parties that would do something for them firmly on the opposition benches. But some do vote, and when they vote, they tend to vote Labour. Given that the Conservatives won their 100% of the power on the back of a relatively small number of seats by small margins, they'd rather not take any chances. So they plan to introduce the photo ID requirements. This disproportionately hits the young and the poor, who are unlikely to have any. And given that it's not an easy or a cheap thing to do, they'll remain without any. Now, I discussed this a while ago when it first came up, a couple of years ago, and it was clear just how many people didn't understand what a big deal it was. Oh, it only costs this much to get one, they said, describing an amount of money that I needed for weeks' worth of food when I was unemployed. Voter apathy is also on the Conservative side. What gains the Conservatives made last week was not due to a huge switch in votes to the Tories. They didn't get an increase when you consider the redistribution from Brexit Party votes. It was Labour supporters staying at home. The reason why in some areas Conservatives got more votes than last time is because they swept up the UKIP and the Brexit Party votes. It was the same thing in 2019. Millions of people who voted Labour in 2017 didn't. They didn't switch to the Tories, they just didn't vote at all. They stayed home, millions of them. So even if you could afford the photo ID, if you're not sure you can actually be bothered to vote, will you go to the effort of getting one? Because after all, if your level of apathy is such that even voting is a hassle, getting photo ID definitely will be. But anyway, the key thing is, will Johnson pull it off? Initial thoughts would be, of course he will, he's got a stonking majority. And this is something that will help his party. Tory MPs will be all over it because it will help them win back their seats, even if they're completely buggering up the country. Even if we're living in a completely different country. In which case the task would fall to the opposition to force the government. They can't stop it, but can they at least make sure everyone who is eligible to vote has access to the ID? After all, the government claim they're doing it to reduce voter fraud. Now, just as in the United States, there is no evidence of significant voter fraud in this country. In fact, if we want to consider any sort of electoral fraud, we'd do better to examine the role of, say, IDOCs in handling ballot papers between casting and counting. And when it comes to fraud, Boris Johnson's Leave campaign group are the last people to have been found to have committed electoral fraud. That's if you don't count the Conservative Party itself during, say, the 2017 general election. So if this is just about stopping voter fraud, opposition MPs need to say, then you're going to have a problem making sure that every citizen over the age of 18 has photo ID provided for them by the government if they don't already have one. You know, you need to pay for that. Can't argue against that. I mean, they can try, but if the opposition really hammer it, I think that's the best path to take. Then I got to thinking, maybe this is not so straightforward for Johnson to even implement. Now, it will be resisted by the House of Lords. It is voter suppression. Everyone knows it's voter suppression, and politicians who are free from the need for cronyism know this. They might even refuse to let it pass. Not just kick up a fuss. They will inevitably kick up a fuss, but they may even just refuse. You shall not pass. Of course, Johnson can force it through with the Parliament Act, but that takes time. That being said, he only needs it in place before the next general election. Now, even if he wants an early election in 2023, he still has time to force it through Parliament by introducing the legislation now. In fact, you could almost imagine he's bringing this in now, much earlier than he needs to, because he expects to have to force it through the Lords. As long as his own MPs back it, he's fine, he'll get it through. But given that you'd expect every single opposition MP to be in favour of this, Johnson can't afford a sizable rebellion in his own party. And this is where I think Labour need to be smart. Now, in opposing this scheme, Labour's natural objection will be to point out that it disenfranchises poorer and younger voters. You are, as someone put it, putting democracy behind a paywall. And this will be Labour's main concern. But it won't help anything, won't change anything. Conservatives are not interested in that argument. And Labour will need Tory MPs to oppose this if they are to stop it. But there is another way. What we have here is the requirement for citizens to carry ID with them. Now, there are a lot of countries, very democratic, very liberal countries, who have this requirement and nobody makes a big deal about it. There'll be people in the comments from other countries going, what's the big deal? There isn't a big deal. But in the UK, and amongst Conservatives in particular, they hate this idea. Again, it all goes back to, the Nazis used to make you carry papers. No, not here, not here. We're not having this behaviour. It's the same thing with face masks. It's not a big deal to wear a face mask in a shop. During winter, these people will think nothing of having a scarf around their face on a cold day. It keeps my face nice and warm. But tell them that they have to do this, or it's an outrage. I cannot even begin to describe the hypocrisy of some Conservatives. They insist that people comply with their rules, but they hate conforming themselves. This is why they tell people who are literally starving to death to stop whining and show a bit of backbone, yet go to pieces when they're told they should stay indoors or wear a face mask in shops. They are the same people who attack lockdown, attack vaccine passports, you name it. If other people have to do it, that's fine, show a bit of backbone. If they have to do something, no, that's outrageous. A blow against democracy. Anything at all that means that they have to comply with a rule is to be attacked. They support genuine oppression of people that aren't them. So by all means, keep the poor in their place, but they want to live like kings. So a better tactic for Labour might be to point out, this scheme you've got here, Boris, seems to be a requirement that people carry ID. Because people dug up a speech from Boris Johnson from 2004, where he said that if he were ever forced to carry ID, he would grind it up and eat it. And it doesn't matter that a lot of these Tories already have photo ID. They've very likely got a driving licence. They're quite likely to have a passport for when they can find countries that will let them holiday there. But if they're told they have to carry it or they're not allowed to vote, that can get their hackles up. And then there's the natural paranoia of the Conservatives to take advantage of as well, where it would lead. It's all right saying you need photo ID to be able to vote. Once you've got that requirement, everyone basically will need to get one. Now, once you've got to the position where everyone needs photo ID, if everyone is assumed to have one, it's a very short step from there, from the police going, well, everyone is supposed to have one of these, so we can just ask you to produce it. Very, very short step indeed, from the requirement to have ID to vote to the requirement to always carry that ID on you. After all, why wouldn't you? Everyone's got it, why not carry it on you? And then the police can ask to see it if they just want to. In a stroke, Boris Johnson is introducing the requirement for all adult citizens of voting age to carry ID with them. The thing that Conservatives went mad about when this was actually proposed a while back is going to happen, and it's going to be the Conservative government who bring it in. This goes against their libertarianism, and Labour should hammer it very hard indeed. Tories in marginal seats will still support it. Of course they will, because it will help them win. Ultimately, that's what they want to win their seats. MPs who don't like to rock the boat will support it because they'll be whipped to. Most MPs ultimately will do what the leader tells them to. But Tory MPs in safe seats who are a bit, awkward, may be different. If Labour can get the message to the general public that this is a scheme to force you to carry ID, forget about the fact that it's voter suppression, hammer the point that this is citizen ID you're introducing here. This is the requirement for all citizens to have ID. And police will know you have it and they can demand to see it at any time. This is citizen ID by stealth, Labour need to say. Then it's the voters in those safe Tory seats that will be the most concerned. They'll be going, hang on a minute, what's this? What? Yeah, you've got to have ID. Never mind that they've already got ID. They'll be thinking, what, you mean I have to have ID? You're forcing me to have ID? Yeah. And they'll be writing to that safe Tory MP to let them know how unhappy they are with this. So although this is going to happen, And I think it is probably going to happen because Boris Johnson seems to be a bit cunning. He's introducing it for first-time voters, not for everyone. I think he knows that this could cause trouble even amongst the Conservatives. That's why he's going, it's not going to apply to everyone. It's only going to apply to first-time voters. Therefore, again, affecting the poor who may not have voted before, or younger people who won't have a driving licence. But again, you just hammer the point. And this is by stealth. This is just the first step, isn't it? This is the thin end of the wedge. You do this now for first-time voters to test it out. Then you're going to bring it in for everyone. You're going to do it for everyone, aren't you? It is then possible to actually defeat it completely, but not with the argument that Labour will naturally want to make. They need to make an argument that Conservatives will respect. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.